So back in 2015, I watched Oreshura, and I remember enjoying it. Although I don't quite remember anything about the series or why I liked it, I just know that I've had the series listed as a 7 out of 10 on Mal ever since. The only thing I recall is that the anime actually ended or had an ending, but besides that, I basically went into the series blind. And after rewatching the anime after all these years, it's clearly not as good as I remember it being. In fact, I'm not really a fan of it. It's far from bad, but I can't say I enjoyed it entirely. But I guess I should explain why that is, so without further ado, it's Morbin time.
Dear pesky plumbers, the Koopalings and I have taken over the Mushroom Kingdom.
So Oreshura centers around Kido Eita, a high school boy who is very serious and hardworking. He has 3 morals that he follows in life. Studies come first, love is unnecessary, and make sure no one thinks that you're gay. Okay, I'll give the show that. It can be funny when it wants to be, although it's sort of inconsistent, but I'll touch on that later. Anyway, Kido spends a lot of his time studying and dicking around with his childhood friend Chiwa, who's also his neighbor, because she wants to suck on his snitchel. So one day, he goes to school, everyone gets their seats changed, and of fucking course, he now gets to sit next to Mizuzu, the hottest slut in class. After a week, or maybe even a couple weeks, she asks him to walk home with her because she loves him.
Wow.
So they walk home together, and Kido asks her why she confessed to him even though she was faking. Mizuzu reveals that she hates everyone because she's a bitch and is tired of guys confessing to her all the time. She wants Kido to become her fake boyfriend so all the other guys will stop asking her out. Since Kido never asked her out or jerked off next to her during class, she knows that he's not like the other guys in school. He might not be gay, but he doesn't care for her nice soft titties. Now this isn't the only reason why she picked Kido to be her fake boyfriend. Apparently, she just so happened to find his old notebook where he wrote about his delusions where he thinks he's a reincarnation of a dragon knight. So now she's blackmailing him into dating him, otherwise she'll release all of the pages online. Okay, this scene does not work, like at all. First off, this episode barely brings up the fact that Kido's a Chinibyo. The first 30 seconds explains this, but besides that, it's never brought up again. We don't see him writing in the notebook. Hell, we don't even see him sell it either. Also, what are the chances that she just so happened to buy his notebook in the first place? I guess no one else would want to buy it, but still, those odds seem very low and unbelievable. This scene sucks. There's no hints or build up to it. It just happens, and it feels really jarring. It feels like we're missing an entire, or at least half an episode before this. This scene, or I guess this episode as a whole then, is poorly written and flawed. So yeah, because of this, Kido is now forced to become Mizuzu's girlfriend, and that's how the first episode ends. Besides the last scene being bullshit, the rest of the episode is just sorta meh. It's not bad or anything, it's just kinda boring and kinda slow. It's easily one of the weaker episodes, but there's nothing too wrong with it, again, besides the last scene that is. It has some funny moments, and Kido and Chiwa don't seem half bad. Mizuzu, on the other hand, is sort of a cunt, but not Chitoge level bad. This then leads us to the next episode where Chiwa finds out that Mizuzu and Kido are dating, or at least believes that they are. So she gets mad, tells Kido that she'll be the most popular girl in school, but then they both just walk away.
You are a fucking piece of shit!
But then the next day, Mizuzu creates a club at school to help Chiwa get a boyfriend because why not? So during the next couple episodes, they try to hook her up with some cringe lord at school even though she doesn't want to be with him. But that's alright because it turns out he was an asshole anyway. Kido acts like a jackass in front of him and his crewmates, gets his hiney whooped, and then Chiwa JV4s them. After this, a new girl, Himika, gets introduced and she wants to suck the hot thick cum out of Kido's large erect penis. She's a weird girl who has delusions like Kido and thinks she's the reincarnation of some princess or something. And then after that, the last girl, Ai, shows up and she's also a weird girl who has delusions too. Now I've said the word delusions multiple times already, and that's because it is a somewhat important aspect of the show even if it isn't the main focus. Because of this, it's very difficult for me to not think of Chinibyo, a much better show, and even one of my favorite anime. And this sort of leads me to one of my biggest problems with Oreshura, which is that it kind of feels like a mesh of series I've already seen, and not in a good way. At times it feels like Chunibyo, since multiple characters are insane and have weird delusions. Then there's Kido and Mizuzu having a fake relationship, which just feels like Nisekoi. Kido then helps Chiwa get into a relationship with another boy, even though she's clearly not interested, which just feels like Toradora. However, not only do they remind me or feel like these series, but they feel like a much weaker version of them. That's because a lot of these ideas presented aren't very developed. Yes, Kido and some other characters will have their delusions from time to time, but it doesn't occur that often, or at least when they do occur, they aren't super over the top like they were in Chunibyo. There, the main character Rika would constantly have her own bizarre delusions, which made the entire show revolve around her. But in Oreshura, there's much more to the series than that, which is certainly fine, but I still never felt like I understood what the series was trying to focus on. It has Kido forced into being in a relationship with Mizuzu, but that doesn't really go anywhere. They both aren't interested in love at first, but then they'll sometimes have moments where they start to get attached to each other, but it never really felt like either of them began to fall in love with each other. It felt more like they were starting to like each other, but nothing more than that. Also, I kinda forgot they were in a relationship sometimes, mainly because of how unfocused the series can be. Yes, they do bring up this fact a decent amount of the time, but sometimes I just forgot. There's a couple episodes that center around Ai, and during them, I forgot about Kido dating Mizuzu, even though she's still in these episodes a fair amount. But I'm going to assume that this is just me unconsciously trying to forget about her because, spoilers, she's worst girl and I is best girl.
Run.
As for the episodes themselves, they're just kind of meh. At worst, they're mediocre and kind of boring, and at best, they're watchable and somewhat enjoyable. My main problem is that they're sort of slow, not that entertaining, and also aren't that funny either. Don't get me wrong, it's nothing generic or bland like Smartphone or anything, but it sort of barely misses the mark in a lot of areas. Take the characters, for example, which I'll talk about in more detail later. A lot of them are fine, not bad, but I wouldn't quite say its cast is good. Sure, it's passable, but I don't think I'm going to be remembering any of these characters besides maybe I after this review. The same goes for its comedy. The show can certainly be funny when it wants to be. For example, in episode 2, Mizuzu outright mentions and talks about Jojo, which is funny. Normally I'd vomit at the mention of a Jojo joke today, but Oreshura came out in 2013, back when it was cool to like Jojo. Now everyone and their mother's hairy asshole talks about it, and it's fucking annoying. Anyway, while this is a funny joke, the series goes and jokes about it at least another 3 times, which gets old. The same goes for Mizuzu reading out Kido's notebook, which embarrasses him and makes him want to kill himself. Again, it's funny the first time, but the series continues to do this at least another 3 times, which just gets old. Besides that though, there honestly isn't too much to say about Oreshura, or at least besides its ending. Yes, like I said before, Oreshura does have an ending, which is great to see in a harem. However, I didn't say it was good. So during episode 11, Kido's aunt comes home and she's like, "Hey, faggot, which one of these whores is your girlfriend?" And he's like, "Oh, it's Mizuzu," and his aunt is like,
No.
She makes dating sim games and understands how girls think, so she knows that their relationship is a crock of shit. After that, she invites everyone to the beach where they can compete in a competition for her upcoming video game, and whichever one of them scores the most points gets to be Kido's girlfriend. So the competition happens, all the girls go, and then it's Mizuzu's turn, and she's all depressed. She's like, "Hey everyone, I'm a bitch, I'm sad, my boyfriend dumped me, I'm a slut and a fucking whore." So then Kido goes up and he's like, "Hey you stupid bitch, I'm a stupid bastard, which is why we're perfect for each other." So they kiss and now they're an actual couple. The next morning, Kido goes into all the other girls' rooms and tries to make them hate him so they can move on to another guy. It ends up failing for all 3 of them, but at least he tried. In fact, when he goes into Chiwa's room, she even kisses him, so that's something. Mizuzu Mizuzu comes in, they argue for 2 seconds, and then it just ends. Okay, let's start off with the positives. I really like that Kido goes to all 3 girls to try and make them hate him. It could have just ended with him dating Mizuzu, but we got to see him get one last one-on-one time with each of these girls, which is nice. Having the main character go and reject girls in harems is something we rarely get to see, so it's nice to see it happen here, even if it didn't technically work out. While I don't like the ending, I will say that it at least has one, which many harems sadly don't. Even if some fans wanted a second season, I think this is a fine way to end the anime. It may not feel like a series conclusion, but I think it's a fair place to end it. It's kinda like Mermaid's ending. It's a good ending that feels conclusive, but also leaves the second season out in the open. Now as for the ending itself, like I already said, I don't like it. Mizuzu and Kido never felt like they were in love, so this sorta just comes out of nowhere. Plus Mizuzu was worst girl, so this also makes me angry since he didn't pick I instead. I don't think the ending feels rushed, it just doesn't make much sense. I guess Mizuzu fans will like it, but even then, I think if the anime was 26 episodes, we would have had more time for their relationship to develop. This also would have made for a much more satisfying ending that also would have made more sense. But although I don't like the ending, I also don't hate it either. I would take this ending over a random episode that doesn't end the series and just says, ha ha, go read the light novel, faggot. Having an ending is very important and is something that many horror anime lack. So at the very least, I do appreciate that the anime does at least have an ending, even if a lot of people don't seem to like it. Either way, it's pretty obvious Kido was an asshole and was going to choose worst girl, so at least we got to see it animated. But I think that's all I have to say for Oreshura's plot, so that means it's time to move on to its characters.
お前どこまで本気なんだ
It's free real estate.
Similar to its plot and episodes, Oreshura's cast is tolerable and okay-ish, I guess. Mizuzu I don't like, but I also don't hate her. I do enjoy, but I also don't love her either. Everyone else is okay, but like I said before, I'm most certainly going to be forgetting them once I'm done with this review. That being said, one area where Oreshura manages to succeed is with its main character Kido, who's actually a decent main character. He's far from the best horror main protagonist, but he's easily one of the better ones. He's not a pussy, and he's not a generic super nice guy either. He's a dude who has weird delusions from time to time, gets some funny lines here and there, and is overall okay. I like him. Not much to complain about except for the fact that he chose worst girl, so he can fuck off. Now besides Kido, that leaves us off with the girls, so it's time for the traditional Waifu War, where each girl is ranked officially from worst to greatest.
Number 4.
Mizuzu Natsukawa. Mizuzu is the main girl in the series, and she's also a bitch. She's a tsundere that constantly says that she doesn't like Kido, but then eventually falls for him for some reason, which is annoying. She may be cute, but she's still an asshole. I don't hate her or anything, but she's still worst girl and by far worst girl. I would still fuck her, but I would probably push her down some stairs afterwards.
Number 3.
Chiwa Harusaki. She was Kido's childhood friend, and she wants him to suck on her Filipino tubes. During middle school, she used to do kendo, but then hit the Quan too hard and broke a couple of her bones, so now she can't do that anymore. After that, Kido dedicated the rest of his time to becoming a doctor so he could cure her, which is a major turn on for her. But yeah, besides that, she was just your typical childhood friend. There's nothing wrong with that, but she isn't too memorable either.
Number 2.
Himika Akashino. Here barely making the number 2 spot is Himika, who's a Chinibyo. She believes that Kido was her boyfriend in her previous life, which is why she has the hots for him. Himika is very clingy and shy, which is always good. However, there's one big problem with her, which is that she barely gets any screen time despite being one of the main characters. She first introduces herself to Kido at the end of episode 5, gets a fair amount of screen time during episode 6, but then does basically nothing for the rest of the anime. She gets some lines here and there, but she feels more like a side character than a main one, which is pretty disappointing. She's definitely one of the more interesting and likable characters, but sadly she just doesn't get much screen time.
What?
Ai for Yumi. Yeah, Ai for Yumi is best girl and by a decent amount too. She's crazy and has two personalities, but she's also been cuckoo crazy for Kido for 10 years, which is spicy goodness. Apparently, she's been engaged to him ever since kindergarten and wants him to sign a marriage license he made in crayon, which is hilarious. I love how stupid and over the top this is, which is why she's the best character in the series. Fuck you, Kido. You should have chosen I instead. Oreshura was animated by A1 Pictures, and they're known for being a very mixed bag studio. Sometimes they can make good looking shows like Erase and Anohana, but then they can also animate Ero Manga Sensei, which looks like dog diarrhea. As for Oreshura, in terms of animation, it's fine. Nothing great, but not bad either. Character designs are okay too, but one area I really enjoy is the color design. Oreshura's color palette consists of duller and dimmer colors that are very washed out. It's still a very colorful show, but the colors aren't super bright and in your face, such as in a series like Nisekoi. Now, I'm not saying either of these styles are better or worse, but I think I do prefer the duller colors if I had to choose. Besides that though, Oreshura overall looks okay. Not bad, not great, just alright. Oreshura's soundtrack is actually not half bad. Now, according to YouTube, there's only 10 tracks, which even for a 13 episode anime is a very low amount. But at least the tracks that are here are overall pretty solid. I can't really complain. Unfortunately, the OP and ED themes were very standard and generic. I listened to them once, and I don't think I'll ever listen to them again. Now, another aspect of the anime is the voice acting, and there's no dub, which means I was forced to watch the sub, which was
恋愛のお供が
Well, that was Oreshura, and it was a mixed bag. There are some decent aspects about it, such as having a decent main character, one solid girl, an ending, and some pretty funny moments here and there. But the comedy is also hit or miss. It can be somewhat boring or slow from time to time, and the ending also isn't good or very satisfying either. There are definitely things to enjoy and appreciate in Oreshura, but there are also things to criticize and be bothered by too. In this case, the strengths or highs of the series just aren't strong enough to merit watching it. It's far from bad, and it's not the worst way to spend 5 hours, but I still wouldn't recommend it. And that's why I'm giving Oreshura a 5.67 out of 10. So that was the anime, but now it's time to check out the manga, which I don't have much expectations for. I'm going to guess it's just the anime but in manga form, but I guess there's only one way to find out.
My name is Jeff.
Well, I read the manga, and it was almost exactly how I thought it would be. It's the anime but in manga form with some small differences. For example, Kido's 3 morals that he follows are different. Instead of making sure that people don't think that you're gay, the last moral is not to make any mistakes, which is really stupid. Why would you get rid of one of the best jokes in the anime and replace it with something generic like this? It's not a big deal, but it's still something that frustrates me. Another difference in the first chapter is that we don't get a short monologue of Kido explaining how he believes he's a dragon knight. Now, this might not seem like much of a change at first, but this actually makes the scene where Mizuzu blackmails him even worse. Because of this, there is now no foreshadowing or hints that Kido is a Chinibyo. So this scene where Mizuzu reveals Kido's quote-unquote secret doesn't work at all. It comes out of nowhere and confuses the reader. If I didn't watch the anime, I'd probably think I skipped a couple pages because I'd have no idea what was happening. But besides that, most of the other changes and differences are very minor. For example, Mizuzu asks Kido to walk home with her, but he refuses, which then results in him asking him again the following 2 days. Now, in terms of plot, this doesn't really change much, but there's one somewhat big thing that this does change, which is Kido himself. So Mizuzu asks him out, he gets confused, tells himself to calm down multiple times, and then rejects her while being flustered. After this, he even refers to Mizuzu as being beautiful, which means he actually finds her attractive. Now, if you compare this to the anime, it's no notably different. When Mizuzu asks him to walk home with her, he gets confused but doesn't even bother to blush. He then tells himself to calm down once and immediately believes that Mizuzu is trying to trick him. Kido isn't embarrassed at all, he's just angry and confused. In the manga, he's blushing the entire time and his eyes are spinning. He still manages to get angry at Mizuzu during these scenes, but it's clear that his character is notably different. He may retain some of his character from the anime, but he's much more generic and wimpy, which is my biggest problem with the manga. I may not have loved Kido before, but at least he wasn't a typical generic horror main protagonist. Unfortunately, that's what he pretty much is here, which is disappointing. I don't hate him or anything, but it just begs the question, why change him at all? Why purposely change something to make it worse? He was fine before, you didn't have to change anything about him. Well, except maybe to have him pick Ai instead of Mizuzu. But besides Kido being notably different and worse, the other differences are very minor and don't change anything. Basically, some scenes take place in a different setting, but the plot and dialogue are still the exact same. For example, in the anime, Mizuzu's little sister Mana comes to school and acts like a cunt towards Kido and Himika. This scene takes place outside, but in the manga it takes place inside the club room. Kido tells Mana to fuck off, and then Mizuzu thanks him in the club room later. The same happens in the manga, except she thanks him on the battle bus. I think you get the idea.
これはジョジョネタよ。
As for the art, it's fine, I guess. The first couple chapters don't look great, but they aren't bad either. The art unsurprisingly improves as the series goes on, and it looks fairly good after chapter 20 or so. Character designs are slightly different from the anime, but I don't mind them. They're all good except for Kido, who consistently looks kinda shit. He's very generic looking, which does make sense considering that fits his character in the manga. That being said, it's still a very forgettable and boring design. But besides that, the art looks okay. Not sure if I'd say it looks better than the anime though. I think they both have their pros and cons. Anyway, there's not much else to talk about since the ending is basically the same. The only new problem I had with it here was when Kido confesses to Mizuzu. He says a rotten boy like me could only be with a rotten girl like you, which doesn't fit since his character isn't that rotten. It made sense in the anime, but here it doesn't work. After this though, everything else is the same except for the last panel. Instead of Mizuzu and Shiwa staring each other down, it ends with all four girls hugging him. And that's about it. That's the manga, and like I said, it's just the anime with Kido being generic along with ever so slight differences here and there. It's a bit faster paced than the anime, and the art isn't half bad either. But in the end, it's still Oreshura, and all the problems I had with the anime applies here. And that's why I'm giving the manga a 5.42 out of 10. Well, that's going to be it for this video. If you liked it, then you can leave a like, comment, share, subscribe, or even support me on Patreon. Now, if you'll excuse me, I'm going to come all over my mouse pad.